A divided church, the Great Schism of 1054.
Since the early centuries of the Church, Christians in the Western world, centered in Rome, Italy, and Christians in the Eastern world, centered in Constantinople, Byzantium, had many differences. Byzantium?
Yeah, it's Byzantium.
Oh, all right, Byzantium. It was natural that as Christianity spread into lands outside the Roman Empire, Christians were introduced to new cultures. Most of the time, new believers in these regions continued to follow local customs. Even though Latin, the language of Rome, was used in church services, the people in these regions rarely used it in everyday life. In the eastern regions, Greek remained the common language. People often mistrust others who don't share their language or customs. Sometimes the differences between East and West were about doctrine or church teachings. One example is the Nicene Creed, a statement written at the Council of Nicaea to define the church's teachings about the Trinity. The Western Church added a line to explain that teaching better, but the Eastern Church believed it corrupted the teaching instead. Another example is the question of whether clerics could be married. In the West, clerics had to vow to remain single, but in the East they were allowed to marry. So Western clerics believed the Eastern ones were less dedicated to the church, and Eastern clerics believed the Western ones were too strict. Eastern Christians decorated churches with images of saints and even prayed to them. They said that as the saints were with God in heaven, they could speak to God on behalf of the living. They argued that just as Old Testament believers carried carved images of angels on the Ark of the Covenant, they should use sculptures and paintings of saints in worship. But the West said these were sinful idols. From Rome, the Pope commanded the Eastern Church to stop honoring saints' images, but the East resisted. Since the Eastern congregations were so far away from Rome, they set up local leaders. At first, they were patriarchs or bishops, of equal authority in many Eastern cities. But the Eastern Emperor lived in the city of Constantinople, and with his support, the Patriarch of Constantinople became the final authority in the Eastern Church. When disagreements arose between East and West, the Patriarch began to challenge the decisions of the Pope. The divide continued to grow. Finally, Pope Leo IX demanded that Patriarch Michael Cerularius submit to the authority of Rome. Patriarch Michael refused. For several years, the two sides argued. Then the Patriarch closed all the Latin churches in Constantinople. Furious, Pope Leo sent representatives to Constantinople on July 16, 1054, to excommunicate, or put out of the church, the Patriarch. In response, Patriarch Michael excommunicated the Pope's messengers. Over the next several centuries, many attempts were made to reunite the East and West, including the Second Council of Lyons in 1274 and the Council of Florence in 1439. But in 1453, Muslim armies captured Constantinople. The rift was complete. Followers of the Eastern tradition became known as Eastern Orthodox. Followers of the Western tradition were known as Roman Catholic. 500 years later, during the Protestant Reformation, the Western tradition divided again. But that event deserves its own account.